A very good afternoon to you all. So you love it, you hate it, but you just can't lump it. The collegium system is here to stay. And we just can't hand over the powers to the executive if you want to have an independent judiciary. That is a given, and I'm going to proceed on the basis of how to improve the system. I'm not going to go into a very philosophical discussion on what Mr. Mohan Gopal and the others have talked about diversity and all, because I think a more practical aspect of how we need to. But two things I would like to highlight. What do we need? We need independent judges. We need judges who are true to the oath to act without fear or favor. Fear is the first word we take when we take oath. Without fear. And it's not fear of the unknown. We know what is the known and what they fear. So we have to, when you think of a collegium system, you have to think what you are choosing for an independent judiciary. Who are you choosing? People who will be independent, who will be fearless, who will have the guts, the spine to say, stand up for themselves and be true to the Constitution. You see, when we talk of constitutional interpretation, I can have a view which is different from Justice Madan Lokur. So there's nothing, in fact, I believe that if the Supreme Court was packed with liberal judges, that would also be a very sad day. It has to be a blend of all, and that will be a reflection of a true system. So before coming to the collegium system, I have two suggestions which are outside the collegium system, but I think they are also directly connected with it. First is, I'm of the strong view that there should be a common retirement age for judges of the Supreme Court and the High Court. One reason is the unholy hold which some of the judges of the Supreme Court exercises on the Chief Justices and senior judges of the High Courts will come to an end. The second is, for 3 years, you will just keep on filling vacancies, and you will have much less vacancies after a period of 3 years. That could take care of a lot of vacancies being filled. Another important aspect in this is that you have judges who are administratively more capable. They can be kept in the high courts. Those who are more intellectually inclined can come to the Supreme Court. And then this fight to come to this pain in the neck, which many of us get looking up at the Supreme Court and not looking at the files, will come to an end, hopefully. The other suggestion is that there should be no post-retirement benefits. We cannot have an independent judiciary with post-retirement benefits. If judges on the verge of retirement throng the corridors of power, looking for crumbs, for after-retirement crumbs, then what justice can we expect from them? I know it can't be done overnight. You can't change the system. You have legislations which prescribe that only retired judges can be considered, but you have to think. So that is the larger, and then we come to the collegium. Because that itself, if you take the pressure of the collegium system, things will become much easier. And that's why I said, though it's not connected with the collegium system, it has a direct bearing on the functioning of the collegium system. Both in the sense of the hold with the Supreme Court collegium, because we are two independent constitutional bodies, but today the high courts are seen to be subordinate to the Supreme Court, which is not the constitutional scheme of things. And unfortunately, even in discussions like this, we pay very little attention to the high court collegiums. Judges, barring a few who are appointed from the Supreme Court bar, all come from the high courts. And what you will get, as you sow, so shall you reap. So if you will not appoint the right judges in the high courts, how will you get the better judges in the Supreme Court? And for that, we have the system of Chief Justice from outside. When it was started off, it may have been as a very good system by Justice Venkatachalaya. But now we have Chief Justice for 3 months, 6 months, 4 months. How do they know the local judges? We have high courts, many high courts, where out of the 3 senior most judges, 2 or sometimes even 3 are outsiders with short tenures. So how do they know? So I have a suggestion that if it's a big high court, why do you have to limit this high court collegium to 3 only? If it's the strength of the high court is 50 or something, why can't there be 7 or 10 or I don't know, whatever number, but there should be a decent number so that the local judges who know the local people are there on the bench. Otherwise, what happens? The Chief Justice is sitting with one junior, normally the Chief Justice sits with the junior judge of the High Court, and he in fact becomes the de facto member of the collegium. So that has to be avoided. And then you could have different methods for different high courts. Then comes the question of if a name is recommended. See, we're living with a collegium system. We're living with all its infirmities. It's, whether it's an old boys club or not, I'm not going to get into that. But if a recommendation is made, then the state must respond within a particular time. And if the state or the state agencies do not respond within 15 days, 30 days, whatever the Supreme Court and the government can sit together and decide, but there should be a timeline laid down that you decide within this. Otherwise, the file automatically goes to the Investigation Bureau, which is to give the report. There are some instances, this about my classmate and who was called Boozer, because he abstained. He was the only one who would not drink in the group. But that was not for political reasons. It was basically the incompetence of the investigating officer. There was no axe to grind in that case. I can tell you very clearly about that. In that case, it was just sheer incompetence. There have been other cases of incompetence which I know where it's not enough time to delve into those. That report can't be final. And it is not treated as final, let me tell you. And I can tell you as a High Court, when I was Chief Justice or even sometimes we get information from police officials we trust. Sometimes our trust could be misplaced. I'm not saying that we're always right, but we do take inputs from lawyers, senior counsel, other people who are not in the fray themselves, and we do try and get inputs. So it's not that as if it's only the 3 who decide, but I would like a much wider role in the collegium system, maybe to the bar also, but then the bar has to be independent. That also has to be a given. And therefore, this, when it comes to the Supreme Court, now I come from a small High Court, Himachal. I also was Chief Justice of 2 very small High Courts, one a medium level, but a very small High Court. What happens is these High Courts are totally ignored in the Supreme Court. Because there's nobody from those High Courts sitting in the Supreme Court by and large, or there's a gap. So the name comes and okay, Himachal, we'll see next week. Chennai there are 2 members in the collegium of Chennai. There are 20 names which have come from Chennai. Let's take them up next week. You're affecting the seniority of the man from Himachal by taking up the names from Chennai first, though those have come. So the name should always be taken up in chronological matter by the Supreme Court collegium. Deal with it as the file comes. And that is how, when you talk of transparency, you will also have to have a system that this file came on this and this date. It was considered by the collegium on this and this date. It was sent to the government on this date. These matters can always be placed on the record. There's no secrecy in those. You're not divulging, even I have nothing against divulging the names also, but supposing you don't want to divulge the names. Recommendation from the A High Court came on such and such date. They were saying, why should there be discrimination between the different High Courts at the Supreme Court level? Because what the government is doing, the collegium is also doing. I have, I don't know, there are some figures which have been shown to me. I have not verified them, but I have come to know that normally it takes 100 days for a recommendation to be approved by the government. Approved, disapproved, but I'm talking about approvals. These are, if it's a Christian, it takes 266 days. If it's a Muslim, it takes more than 350 days. If those figures are correct, and I believe them to be correct, then it's a very dangerous trend. Because you're making sure that they never become senior judges, they never become chief justices, and they never reach the Supreme Court. So now this should be in the public domain so that we can ask questions. I'm not into individuals. Because finally, no system is totally, whatever system you have, it is the men and women who man the system who matter. You had no system till 73 almost, you had no system. But you also had a system where the recommendation made by a chief justice was never never refused by the government. So if the chief justice, though it was the government was appointing, in fact, the de facto thing was that it was the chief justices who were appointing by sending the names. 73, we saw a different trend start. Professor Mustafa talked about government-appointed judges. I know in Himachal, we had a gentleman who, when Chief Justice P.D. Desai was our Chief Justice, he said no to appointing him as a judge. When the Chief Minister insisted, no, you please appoint him as a judge, all the 5 judges of the High Court, there were only 5, said he is not fit to be a judge of the court. But well, the government found him fit to be a judge of the Delhi High Court, so he was appointed in the Delhi High Court. So every system can be beaten. But you still need to have systems in place so that individual idiosyncrasies don't rule. I only feel that when you lay down systems, you'll have to make sure that these timelines are adhered to. And there, the Supreme Court must crack the whip if it needs to. If reiterations are not accepted by the government, then they should be forced to accept it. And that is the rule of law. If you cannot enforce the rule of law, well, then we're heading for anarchy. Thank you.